And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. And speaking today, we're so glad to have along Rachel Coldicutt, OBE. Hello. Rachel is a researcher and strategist specialising in inclusive community-powered innovation and the social impacts of new and emerging technology. She's the founder and executive director of Careful Industries, having previously been the founding CEO of responsible technology think tank Everyone, and leading influential and groundbreaking research into technology and how it's changing society and developing practical tools for responsible innovation. Before that, with 20... I can carry on. You're going to do... She's going to be much better at introducing herself than I can ever possibly be. So, I'd like to hand over to Rachel.
Hello. Right. So I suppose I was once on this side of the room, in that I spent 10 years working in the culture sector. I moved on in 2012 when it's a very different world, partly because some of the things I was trying to do, nobody really wanted, and it felt a bit sad. And what was really interesting, just listening to Ash, is like he could have been talking about some of the things I experienced in 2009. So that was quite sobering, I have to say. But so I started working on the web in 1995, when it wasn't like a real job and people would look at you a bit weirdly. And then did a load of things, worked at the BBC, and then worked on this ridiculous project at the V&A that before anybody had MMS on their phones, we were trying to get people to send in photos, right? While digitising the collection, and for reasons I can't explain, what we ended up doing was buying a London cab and driving it around with a video booth in the back, and like basically pulling people in to get them to talk to us. You know, so that was a completely different world where like TikTok had not been imagined. The idea that you would be talking about something to camera for a minute and a half was like very weird to people. So I left there, worked at the Royal Opera House, put the Opera House on the internet with all the craziness that involved. That's a conversation to have in the pub, I would have thought. Then ran an innovation consultancy working in arts and culture, and we did a thing called Culture Hack Day. And so I'm telling you all of that because I want you to know some of the things I'm going to talk about now make you feel there are a million miles away from some of the things you're thinking about day to day. But I think it's really important. And I'm also going to warn you that there's going to be loads of time for Q&A. And so be thinking about that now, because otherwise it will be really awkward. So, right. So basically, I've got 5 things to be thinking about kind of broadly. And these are things to be thinking about, not just day to day, but in your experience as digital makers, right? And I think something you probably don't think about and don't remember is how people out of the cultural world view your work and how important it is. And before I get into the slides, I think there's like something to be said, thank you, in the moment we're in now, right? It has never been more important to be looking after digital material, right? The knowledge, the information that you are custodians of, that you are allowing people ways in to, you need to hold that very preciously, right? There's many things that are happening in the world. Some of them I'll talk about now. But it's like in between the problems of getting things done, the lack of money, everything else, kind of know that you're doing something that is really, really important, and that maybe your role is quite different to some of those you're looking at elsewhere. So, that's me. I run like a tiny R&D studio, and we do all kinds of things from a forced diet policy to training. And I'll talk a little bit more about our work at the end, but you don't really need to know about that for now. Because what I'm going to do is take you through kind of 5 pithy aphorisms that will help you think differently about technology, AI, everything that's happening now. So our mission at Colourful Industries is to make technology work for 8 billion people, not 8 billionaires. And that might sound quite grand. But the thing is, when we make a lot of things and we go about our daily business, a lot of the time, what we are doing is we are making money for these 8 men. And these 8 men are disproportionately powerful. They are as powerful, if not more, than heads of the state. You know, they are, I think Sam Altman, if anyone has read, well, I'll talk about this later, but Empire of AI, which is on a later slide, listen to the audio book. It's like this completely horrifying mixture of a soap opera and like a history of recent AI, in which you have like people who have lost their mind walking around the office and shouting growth, scale, like it's a religion, right? You know, they are living in a bubble, and some of the things that we are doing and making and purchasing are enabling that, right? And we don't really have to. And I think one of the things that's very depressing as a diligent individual working in digital now is that some of the most powerful people in the world are just doing like really weird things. And so this was earlier this week, Mark Andreessen, who is co-owner of Andreessen Horowitz, who are one of the largest venture capital companies in the Valley, is like he's a wrestler trying to pick a fight with the Pope, because the Pope has some opinions about AI that he doesn't agree with. Mark Andreessen wrote this sort of weird manifesto a couple of years ago that's a bit sort of Nietzschean in its undertones, which is like a code word for fascist, unfortunately. And so while everybody else is like working hard, he is like trying to have a fight with the Pope. And I think one of the things I find really hard in my work is that whenever I'm doing ethical audits or talking about policy in government, I have to work really hard. I have to be really evident. I have to be really clear about why something may not be a good idea. But people like this, they're just mad, crazy, right? But they are, unfortunately, creating like the narrative context that we're all operating in, right? And, you know, everyone has probably experienced their CEO, a trustee, emailing you or slacking you or whatever, a link to a thing and saying, we should do this, right? When I worked at the Opera House, I was always coming into cuttings on my desk with like an exclamation mark on them. And, you know, a lot of that comes out of this like, this narrative that AI is all about power and money, and that actually we can be doing good, responsible, ethical things, but it has to be out of that context. another part of this is like the infrastructure we're dependent on, right? And this may not seem like a huge thing in your day-to-day work, but thinking about the choices that we are making for things like hosting and we're now in this world where a tiny number of companies have a monopoly on most of the digital infrastructure. AWS went down about a month ago, and I think Cloudflare went down the week before. When those things happen, nothing works. And I think there's something really interesting to be thinking about for you to be offering excellent experiences to the people who need you. Where do you need to be? How do you need to be thinking about that? And so there is like, I know that going through procurement is really hard. And like listening to Ash kind of gave me a flashback to like 2008 when I needed to procure and implement a whole new ticketing system before the end of August, because that was when our financial year was, even though the project would take twice as long as that, right? But like when you're purchasing things, who are they for, really? And I think as Alistair was talking about, like, if you meet the needs of your most vulnerable users first, you're meeting everyone's needs, right? And so can we be putting those people first rather than necessarily always taking what might seem like the easier route of doing the Microsoft path, for instance? Other providers are available. So, like, at the heart of this, right, I think it's always really difficult, particularly when you come to events like this and you think, God, they're doing this thing, it's really cool. We can't do that, right? But I think FOMO is undeniably something that moves us on, right? Something that makes us curious, it makes us interested, but it is not a strategy, right? And I think this is maybe not as relevant for everybody in this room who is making things day to day, but it is certainly an issue for your board and your leadership team. And there's this feeling, I think, particularly in digital, right? When things really work, no one hears about them. There's nothing to say when it works well. You only hear about it when it isn't working, right? And there's something about, it's really, really difficult to be delivering something that is high profile within your organisation, that is respected, that no one is aware of, right? But that is in a way what you really want to do, right? It just needs to work. And if I think back to when I worked at the Opera House, there's always really, we closed every August to, and the building was tarted up. And one of the things that happened was the stairs to the very cheapest tickets in the auditorium went up this quite grand staircase. And every August, the facilities manager would put 3 layers of carpet underlay under those, under the carpet. And when you walked up those stairs, it was amazing. You felt like you were going to a really special thing, even though when you arrived, you were on a horrible, hard, rolled-out chair, right? But there's something about like the care and the diligence which people take with them, which is very different to the flashier things, right? That seem amazing, but they don't really last. I mean, I have a bee in my bonnet. I don't know. Do people in this room get sold Copilot internally? I'm obsessed with this, right? That this idea of like normalizing everything you do in the workplace through a fundamentally messaging channel. And I think a lot of the things that people who don't work in digital, who are involved in technology procurement will hear, so finance directors, IT directors, CEOs, are that technology will be changing everything at work. It will make everything completely different. You will be much more productive, much more efficient, unrecognizable. You just need to let this all in. One of the things, I do loads of work with organizations who are adopting technologies like this one. One of the things we hear a lot is that there will be a small number of people who really love these tools and get loads out of them, and now there'll be loads of people who don't. One reason is they're not like rolled out with care, but another is that not everybody works in one way, right? And I think there's something really interesting about being a digital professional in a time when technologies that have maybe not been like your area or are like related to your expertise but are not your area are being rolled out, what they do to the culture, and is there an opportunity for a little bit of leadership there? So this is the book I was mentioning on the right. Everybody ought to listen to the audio book. Like, it will really give you a great lesson in FOMO as a disruptive force, right? And that when you start to look at actually the lack of care and diligence that is put into making these technologies, it will make you think very differently about things like GPT, right? Which may make life slightly easier day to day, but which is actually it's not fundamentally engineered to be helpful to you. Another thing that is really interesting when thinking about FOMO is thinking about hype. So the other book here, this one, looks at 100 years of innovation and what typifies things that have had loads and loads of hype. And one of them is that nobody understands them. And so there's this thing about hype that it needs to be vague enough but interesting enough for lots of different people to get behind, right? And so here's a question actually, put your hand up if you could confidently give a one-line definition of AI. Right. That is the correct answer, by the way. Because the thing is, it is fundamentally a marketing term. It was coined in 1952 by a man with a funding application that had to go in because he was running an event the next year. There's a load of technologies that sit loosely under that umbrella, right? And there's a lot of very complex interrelations between those. But there's no reason it is called artificial intelligence. It just happens to be, the label on the bucket of things. And the person who named it said later on he wished he'd called it machine intelligence. That actually we're kind of getting to grips with these things that are actually, they're as much narrative ideas as anything else. Another thing, right, that I see coming up loads in the work I do, particularly with government and charities, is that AI is fundamentally an austerity technology, by which I mean it's not, like I don't know if anybody remembers like 10 years ago when everyone was talking about this amazing post-work world in which we'd be getting our beers delivered to us by drones and no one would have to do anything anymore. Right. The reality of most of the generative AI that is introduced into the workplace is it might save you time, but it might give another person loads more work. Like, has anybody had to read like a 30-page document that somebody else has generated in Copilot but not actually read? That is the bane of the modern office, right? And so it's like there's an extent to which these technologies make us feel like we're doing more, but that is actually because we individually are working more, right? We're taking on more and more and more and more, and maybe having that path eased by automating things. And that actually, back to the point that Ash was making, it's very difficult to be making good quality things when you're taking on more and more all the time. This is me in the in Asda making a purchase, experiencing some non-fully automated luxury as my purchase wasn't going through. And the reality is, for many people who turn up to your venues, for many people using your sites, what digital results in is very often uncanny outcomes, like meetings with 14 people's note takers in, or like these experiences that never quite resolve, where you end up in a car park in the dark, working out how to pay on an app, right? It's like the automation very often pushes the work elsewhere, and to a point where that is not resolved. I particularly, just as a side point, object to the idea that if I walk around the supermarket and I scan everything, it's cheaper. Like, there's something in there about, everything is becoming harder and harder and harder work. And that actually, can we make things, particularly if what we're doing is we're giving people like an entry into delight, entertainment, knowledge, right? Can that be careful? Can it be enticing? Can it be attractive and not like this? So this is a really important thing, and it's really underrated, right? That in digital life, there's many technologies that when you stop to think about it, they're a bit creepy and weird. And something that I think particularly digital professionals don't always have the time to do, right, is, or maybe the status, is to say, this is making me uncomfortable. I don't want to do it. I don't think it's the right thing. You might not always be able to articulate why, but I think it's worth, if things come up that make you feel uncomfortable, it is worth interrogating that and sitting with it and working out why. So this here is a blog post that Richard Pope, he's a service designer who works in government, wrote about 10 years ago. And he was talking about how, as he was introducing more and more more and more smoothing and personalization into people's experience, what he was realizing is he's taking away their agency. He's making decisions on their behalf. and that those decisions are political, right? That what you're doing in designing a service or a way of doing things is you're telling people how it ought to be, right? And there's a lot of responsibility in that. Not least because many of the technologies that we're using began in very different contexts, in the military, in carceral context. If we think about, there is a world in which a smart watch is not that different to an ankle monitor. It's just that we're choosing to use it, right? And when we're thinking about the data that people are leaving behind, like I've worked with loads of people in marketing, and I'm really sorry if there's anyone here who thinks this, but who think there is never enough data, that all we need to do is capture a little bit more, get people to have another email, find out like another thing about them. You don't need that. You really don't, right? Like the likelihood with the size of your audience that you can segment again and again and again and get to ultra targeted outcomes is not high, right? You need to be reaching millions and millions of people for that to work. And that actually there is a lot to be said in terms of allowing the people who interact with you to relax, to not feel like things that are happening to them are creepy and weird, like they're allowed to have a good time. And I think it's really interesting to think about some of the ways that the technologies that we're all using to do different things turn up in people's lives in other ways and what that means, right? So, and I think back to my point earlier about sometimes underestimating the role of arts and culture in making culture, making experiences. And so there's a number of stories up here. There's the post office scandal. There's the Australian robot debt commission, where hundreds of thousands of people were wrongly accused of incorrectly claiming benefits, and legal action was begun against them. There is the fact that many ways that AI-generated transcription is meant to work don't really work, but we don't know that is the case until after the fact, right? And I think there is something about how can you champion and create delightful, extraordinary things that don't do these things, right? And make a new normal that others are able to follow. So lastly, something I like to talk about is like, what if we, I love the internet. I love technology. The reason I've been working in it for 30 years is because I think it's amazing. What I don't love is people grabbing power. I don't love people using data unethically. I don't love data centers that are massively impacting the environment, or data labeling that exploits workers in Kenya, right? These are things that are all happening. We don't need to lean into those, right? And maybe you're not in a place where you can say, well, what we're going to do is self-host, totally ethically, be responsible for all of that. Like, that is very difficult. What you can do is be a pragmatist, right? Just enough. What is just enough data? What is just enough exploring? And I quite often talk about myself as a digital Goldilocks. It's like you don't really know what just enough is until you're doing it, right? Back to what I was talking about earlier. As like experienced people working in the field, you will know when something is too much, right? And equally, you will know when something doesn't really work. And I think very often projects get like pushed through, and I think Ash was talking about this. They get like, because they're happening now, and I think it's okay to basically say we're doing the wrong thing. Can we do something else? Because there's nothing worse than living with a long, complicated thing that hasn't worked and that everybody hates. You know, so kind of feel a little bit empowered to kind of say, well, you know, that's too hot, that's too cold. I want it to be just right. So we have made a tool that helps people kind of lean into some of these instinctive things, and that where this began in 2018, I co-created a thing called consequence scanning. That was made for teams who are working on products, right? And so for agile teams, it was designed as something that people could integrate into their workflow in order that they could begin to QA against the impact of their product in the world, not just against what it was meant to do. So we released that in 2018. And it's been used by governments all over the world. Salesforce use it, British Aerospace use it. It's very simple, easy prompts. And one of the things I realised over the last year is that AI brings with it very different things. So what we've done in there, like we did loads of testing to understand what the easiest way to get people to think about this was. And I realised that it's really difficult to educate everybody who is a part of a product decision. Like whether you're making, purchasing, adopting, rolling out, changing a way of working. There'll be all kinds of people in the room who are bringing different expertise that is not really related to technology or its impacts. So we've designed sets of questions that help you understand what is the impact of this on people, what is the impact of this on the resilience of our organisation, what is the impact of this on the environment, and what is the impact of this on trust. When you do it, it takes like, basically there's a list of questions on our site that you could run through that would maybe take you half an hour on your own. We've got a canvas here that is linked online that you can use to workshop. But equally, like it might be that you begin and you realise you don't know all the answers and you need to go away and find out. And like, that's okay. So like we tested that with mostly people who work in, mostly people who work in government, but we had a cohort of people in the arts and one of people working in the charity world. And so it's very general, might not meet all your needs, but it's kind of there to help you think about things. So basically, it's like my overall message is like, you're all amazing, right? And that I think it's really difficult to be in a world where it can be very difficult to get things done in your organisation. and the world of technology is like moving on around you out there. But there is a real opportunity to lead, right? And to make things that are amazing, that everybody wants. And that is what I hope you will take away from that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Have we got time for about 10 minutes of questions, if anyone wants to ask anything from the audience? Put the hand up. Any other points? Stunned silence. That's fantastic. Oh, there you go.
I've got the mic. Do a song. Hello, I'm Robert O'Toole from the University of Warwick. And I've got a fairly blunt question, which is, how the hell do we get our absolutely terrible government leadership, often leaders of cultural organisations, to understand this and start making smart decisions and stop being fooled by big tech? It was a brilliant talk, by the way. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks.
I mean, it's like, right, one of the problems is that people who have money have a lot more credibility than people who don't have money in the world that we're in at the moment, unfortunately. But I think one of the ways to do it, you know, and I hate to be cheesy, is by like making things that are really great and talking about them, you know, and to lead in a different way. And like, I have been working this year with a redacted funder. And one of the things that's been super interesting is the lack of confidence, right? This idea that you have to get to the right answer, that there is one answer that is the right answer, and that can be provided, and then everything in the world will be different. But I think leaning into that confidence and expertise, I've seen, like, the number of people I have seen who slightly crumble when someone from Google is introduced into the room, and everyone is kind of falling over themselves because the possibility of money, right, that comes with that, you know. And so I think making great things, and maybe internally in your organisations, empowering your leaders to talk about what you've made, you know. But I completely know that when there's not enough money, someone is going to want to be accommodating of that. And I think it's a difficult time. It's my non-answer to that question.
Fantastic, absolutely.
Why can't I get these mics? Loved that talk. It was really, really engaging with lots of things to talk about and think about. When you were talking about over the 30 years that you've had working in and around the space, how similar or different is this hype cycle that you feel of AI compared to other hype cycles that we lived through?
Like, basically, the only thing that's different now is there's even more money. And so I would say one of the things I'm really worried about at the moment is the idea that lots and lots of money is being spent on physical infrastructure, that if there is an AI bubble, if that bursts, what are we going to do with that? Like, that feels economically and environmentally, those two things are very worrying to me. That it's like this idea that we're in a hole, technology is magical, ... everything's okay. And I think the thing that is different is I think every hype cycle becomes bigger, you know, and maybe lasts for slightly longer. I noticed today that a think tank has like released a paper about like blockchain and digital idea. It's like, can that not go now? Can we not stop talking about that one? Like, but it's like these. It's like that. Like there's always a thing, and I think one of the reasons is particularly like back to that thing of people get like the vagueness is one of the things that means that people are able to pile loads of hope into it. And so, like, the worse things are, like, the less money there is, the less political cohesion, the more uncertainty, the more promise of a vague magical thing, right? That then becomes the token for everything, like an imaginary. But one of the things I do think that will happen over the next couple of years is like a weariness about AI. And I think, like, this year, I think the thing I've heard most often is people talking about nobody knows what is real anymore. And that is just normal. It's like, is this a real image or is it a made-up image? Is this a real headline? Is this a real video? And that there's an extent to which that cannot carry on. That has to bottom out. So there's loads of different complicated things happening, I think, which make this feel different. But it's, like, very recognisable in lots of ways to, like, 1999, depressingly, I think. We got another one?
Super. Anyone? Oh,
Yeah.
Josie.
Thanks for the talk. It was great, Rachel. I think, like, one of the big differences between the web hype was that the web was fundamentally driven by lots of people who actually had quite humane interests and hopeful interests for humanity in the technologies. And this time around, it seems very, very firmly commercially driven and pinned to the economic hopes of nations, etc., etc. So is there a way, and feel free just to say no, but is there a way into those technologies like AI for people who are actually interested in those kind of broader social goods that technology can bring around? Or is it just a poison chalice?
Yeah,
and tech?
So I think, right, there's this, if you're engaged in the technology ethics debate that kind of happens on the internet, one of the things you'll see is that, like with everything that happens online, there's a very kind of strict binary now, right, in terms of you're either doing the good thing or the bad thing. And, you know, one of the reasons I talk about just enough, right, is that we don't live in a perfect world and we're compromising constantly. And one of the things I think that has happened this year is that a lot of people who work in tech who didn't really have an opinion are starting to feel more and more uncomfortable. One of the things I would say that's responsible for that is what happened with Doge and Musk in the States. You know, so seeing technology be used for like blatantly inhumane reasons that couldn't be wrapped up as anything else, I think kind of sent a little bit of a moral panic through a bunch of people. And one of the things that makes me quite hopeful is I've like accidentally started it's like a professional society for hopeful technologists. So there's a few hundred of us, people working in tech who want it to be better. We surveyed 522 people in July. And what was super interesting about that, right, is something like 98% of people who we asked didn't think that sort of leading narratives in technology were representing them. But only 15% felt like they knew how to react or what to do. And so what we've been doing for the last 4 months is like co-designing what this organisation might do. We just had our last co-design session about 3 weeks ago. But one of the things we want to do through that is do training and advocacy, like advocacy training for people working in tech. You know, give people the skills to talk about things that make them uncomfortable, to advocate for better outcomes, you know, to be like, it's extraordinary to me that very highly educated, high agency people don't have the experience to be able to speak up when things that they think are problematic are happening. But, I think there is an opportunity to mobilise there with the aim of making more regenerative, hopeful technology normal again, I think.
Super. Well, I think that wraps everything up. Lovely. So I'd just like to thank you to Rachel.
Brilliant, thank you.